Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Katie Haven. I'm running for Okanogan County Commissioner, and I'm going to be your host tonight. I know it's been a difficult time for a lot of folks with the fires and the smoke and the other challenges that we've been facing, but I really am very grateful that you took the time to come out and meet Denny Heck, who's running for Lieutenant Governor. He's going to join us in a moment. I wanted to share a little bit about my background for those of you who don't know me. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and worked for almost 30 years as an officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine. After I retired as the chief engineer, I settled down on our little sheep ranch here in Okanogan County. I've been following our local government closely as part of a group called Okanogan County Watch, and that led me to actually run for office as commissioner. I'm an experienced leader who has experience with handling responsibility and teamwork and getting the job done. I know how to bring people together to solve complicated issues, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work. So that's enough about me. Right now, I'm going to just introduce you to Denny Heck. Denny has more than 4 decades of experience serving the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Since 2012, he's represented our state's 10th congressional district in Washington, D.C. There, he served on the House Intelligence Committee that led the impeachment investigation. He also served on the Joint Economic Committee and the Financial Services Committee. Before that, he was state representative 17th legislative district. The 17th was the only district to span both Western and Eastern Washington, which makes him uniquely qualified to understand and represent all of Washington state. So without further ado, let's welcome Denny Heck.
Thank you, Katie, very much. And good evening, Okanogan County Democrats. The most important thing I can say to you tonight is thank you. Thank you for your sole endorsement of our candidacy for Lieutenant Governor. Now, look, if you've not run for public office before, it's hard to fully understand how meaningful it is when you receive an endorsement. It's an affirmation of all the hard work and effort you're undertaking, and it matters a great deal, and I want you to know I'm very, very appreciative. I also want to acknowledge some of the challenges that you've been going through up there with the wildfires over the last several weeks. 2 weeks ago, interesting and tragic point of fact, on a Tuesday, today's Tuesday, 2 weeks ago today, twice as many acres were burned in Washington state as were burned in all of 2019. On the Monday before, plus Tuesday, that 48-hour period of time, there were more acres burned in Washington state than in each of 17 of the last 18 years. Our planet's on fire, literally. And it's obviously because of climate change. There's probably not anything that puts into more stark contrast the values of Democrats than that of the other political party, than our acknowledgement that climate change is real, it's human caused, and we must act with urgency. One of the most difficult text exchanges I've had over the last 2 weeks was with Peter Goldmark, whom, as I'm sure you all know, lost the ranch that had been in the family for, I think, 100 years by now. It's a problem that cries out for us to attack it. But let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I hope I don't undercut the support that you've extended to me thus far. I am a lifelong Washingtonian. I was born and raised in Vancouver, and my wife, Paula, who is a retired middle school teacher and principal, have been married for 44 years. I'm on probation. She was on probation a while. Now I'm on probation. I'm pretty sure, however, we're going to make it after 44 years. I think, however, the most important thing you can know about a candidate for any office, whether it's fire district commissioner or president of the United States, is what are their values. I want you to know what mine are. First and foremost, I believe in the importance of speaking out, standing up and speaking out and advocating on behalf of the vulnerable. That's the job of an elected official. If they don't do it, who will? I also think we have to be unrelenting in our effort to advance the causes of social and economic and racial justice. I think we have a bit of a window of opportunity in that regard that we haven't experienced in quite some time, but it's not going to happen on its own. We have to all put our shoulder to the wheel. As Dr. Martin Luther King like to say, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. We've got to get to work after it. Secondly, I believe in the power and importance of an education. It's just not the paramount duty as stipulated in Article 9, Section 1 of our Constitution. It's something that we absolutely should do. My dad was forced to leave school as the oldest of 6 children in the 9th grade. And as the Great Depression had arrived. And as a consequence, at least once a week, he would say to me and my 3 siblings at the dinner table, they can take it all away from you but your education, so get one. I believe in our constitutional duty. I believe in the values my dad taught me, even if I haven't been married to a middle school principal for the last 44 years. Those are the values I'd bring to the job of Lieutenant Governor. I also bring a unique depth and breadth of experience. I was elected to 5 terms, as Katie indicated, in the State House, where I served as Majority Leader. I then served as Chief of Staff to Governor Booth Gardner. And Chief of Staff in the Gardner administration meant I was the Chief Operating Officer of all of state government. When he voluntarily retired and took the ambassadorial posting to the World Trade Organization, I co-founded and was the first longtime president and CEO of your very favorite statewide public affairs network, TVW. I then entered the private sector for a period of time. I co-founded a company with 2 employees. We built it up to more than 300. And then, of course, as Katie indicated earlier, I was elected to Congress in 2012, and I'm finishing my 4th term there. Those are the values and experiences I would bring to the job of Lieutenant Governor. And they're going to be needed in the 2021 session when we confront the triple crises of COVID, an economic recession, and a budget hole unlike we've had since 1981-83. I know there will be questions about how I will apply my values in those instances, so let me just conclude by once again thanking you. I'd like to have a concrete manifestation of my gratitude. If Madam Chair Kirsten doesn't object, I have a little bit of money left over in my Congressional Reelection Committee. I can't spend it on my Lieutenant Governor Committee, so I'd like to send Okanogan County Democrats $500. But if you object, I won't do it. Just let me know one way or another, just as a small token of my appreciation for your support. And Katie, I'd be glad to answer any questions now.
Great. Well, I don't have any questions myself, but some of our viewers do. They sent some questions in. I really appreciate your concern on a personal level for us and the experience with the fires. I lived through the Carlton Complex fire myself, so I'm very familiar with how people are feeling, and my heart goes out to everybody. It is so challenging and hard time to get through. So we have asked our viewers to submit any questions they might have for you. We're going to do our best to get through all the questions that were submitted, but if we miss your question, you can reach out to Denny's campaign at info@dennyheck.com, and you'll see it on the screen there with your question, and I'll get back to you. So Denny, sounds like you're ready to answer some questions.
Let's go.
Okay. First question, in general, what are the duties of the Lieutenant Governor, and what are you most looking forward to in the role?
So I tend to think of the duties of the Lieutenant Governor in 3 buckets. And by the way, it's a terrific question. First is the Lieutenant Governor is the insurance policy in case the governor gets hit by a bus, by which I mean according to the Constitution, the Lieutenant Governor automatically becomes governor. Secondly, according to the Constitution, the Lieutenant Governor is the President of the State Senate and the presiding officer. The responsibility is very straightforward. Competently apply the rules of the Senate in a fair and a civil way. There aren't very many people that have a greater opportunity to set a tone of civility than the presiding officer. Thirdly, other duties is assigned or self-assigned. By law, the Lieutenant Governor is on 10 boards and commissions, but they also have an opportunity to pick areas of emphasis of their own. The board of commission that I'm most focused on is chairing the bicameral bipartisan legislative committee on economic development and international relations. In part, I'm excited about that because I have private sector experience, because I've served on multiple committees of jurisdiction relating to the economy. I know we're going to be in a recession in January, and I know that we need to build back better. We need to build our economy in a way that more broadly shares prosperity. We've had wage stagnation for 40 years in this country, and we need to build it in a way that is more sustainable, that is kinder and gentler to Mother Earth, put bluntly. And there are ways that we can rebuild the economy to achieve just that.
Great. Well, that sounds, that educated me because I didn't really know what a lieutenant governor did before I was preparing for this. So hopefully our viewers learned something.
That's all right. That's all right, Katie. That's all right. I don't know what a chief engineer does either.
Okay, well then we're even. Okay, how do you see your role as Lieutenant Governor assisting Washington in the recovery that we face after COVID-19?
So I think the most important thing that the lieutenant governor can do is use the gravitas of the office to speak out on behalf of science. And what I mean by that is to work in supporting Governor Inslee, who has taken a science-based approach to this, to ensure that we are employing the kinds of public health measures that the professionals have recommended that we know will defeat the virus, from masking up to maintaining social distancing to frequent washing of hands. If we want our economy back on track, we have to beat the virus. We want to beat the virus, then until we have a vaccine, we need to aggressively pursue those things in accordance with public health standards. And speaking out for that and supporting the governor is one very good way that the lieutenant governor can participate in recovery.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, next question. How can Eastern Washington Democrats become more involved in the state issues?
Know your power, Eastern Washington. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we elected a governor in this state by 133 votes. And so sometimes, if you happen to come from an area that tends to be more red than blue on a statewide basis, you can look at that and despair. But that would be wrong. The truth is that the work that you do in your county may very well make the difference in a close statewide race. We know this to be true because it once was. Chris Gregoire was elected on 129 votes, and then Dino Rossi decided to litigate it in court in Chelan County, where I think it was Judge Bridges, added 4 votes, so it became 133 votes. Those 133 votes could come out of Okanogan County by virtue of the effort you undertake between now and November 3rd. We're going to have a couple of tight statewide ballot races, possibly state treasurer, which we ought to get back, possibly secretary of state, which we haven't had in 60 years. And so your efforts in your county matter. Know your power. Above and beyond that, of course, you can participate in the National Adopt a State program to help Vice President Biden do that which this country desperately needs, which is to replace the occupant of the White House.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just want to say we know about tight races here in Okanogan County because in 2012, the commissioner race was decided by 10 votes countywide. And my primary, just in August, I won by only 30 votes. So, you know, every single vote counts.
Landslide Katie.
Okay, so next question. What are the first things you will do to address our climate crisis when you take office?
So I think the most important thing that can happen, frankly, is a carbon fee and dividend bill. I think we'll continue to emit carbon pollution until such time as we've created economic incentives in alliance or in accordance with the actual cost. You know, the fact of the matter is fossil fuel companies get to externalize all the cost. Who was paying for the firefighters? Who was paying for the insurance where insurance applied? You and I were. The fossil fuel companies weren't. And those wildfires were created by global warming. So what we need to do is make sure that our own behavior as individuals is creating less carbon pollution. And I don't know how we get there until we have a carbon fee, which we can then rebate to people to hold them harmless, but to in effect make sure that that activity of emitting carbon pollution will be deterred and that we'll be incentivized to do less of it. And we have an existential threat here. The kinds of wildfires we've seen are just part of the pattern of severe weather events, whether it's flooding or hurricanes or tornadoes, and we're all paying the cost of that.
Yes, I'd love to get deeper into that with you, but we'll just move on. There's so much to say on this topic. The next question is about broadband. Would you support the creation of statewide broadband? If so, how would you do this?
So I believe that extending broadband to all areas, we tend to think of it in terms of just extending it to rural broadband, but there are actually urban pockets of deserts as well. I think the effort to extend broadband to everybody is the 21st century equivalent of electrification from the 20th century, the early 20th century. And I think that we ought to see the recession we're in which we will inevitably make major investments in infrastructure as a way to stimulate the economy and put people to work, as an opportunity to finally get this done. And if we don't get this done, I think it's political malfeasance and misfeasance. Because what we have learned, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that the well lubricated functioning of our economy is dependent upon people having access to broadband. And we're being treated, for those communities that are still, whose children are still receiving their education distantly, to a painful reminder that not everybody has access to broadband. They don't have devices, they don't have connectivity, and there are any percentage of school children today in these school districts that are still learning remotely that aren't getting the kind of education that our Constitution guarantees them. So yes, statewide broadband in all areas.
Well, I know that in my talking with voters here, it is one of the main topics that I hear people ask me about. I have to say, one of the top two or three for sure. People absolutely depend on it. Okay, next question. What are the top three issues you will attack first? And what is your plan to achieve those goals that will unite divided constituents?
So I already alluded to the top three ones that are immediate, and then there are a couple of others that I want to talk about. The top three are dealing with COVID, the pandemic, and that again is taking an approach that is science-based, and then is dealing with the economic recession. I hope to have a particular opportunity to do that if I'm elected lieutenant governor, chairing the Legislative Committee on Economic Development. That's not an authorizing committee. Excuse me. That's not an authorizing committee, but has an opportunity to provide some meaningful leadership. In that regard, again, I think what we ought to be doing is rebuilding the economy in a way that more broadly shares prosperity and making investments in infrastructure. One of the many areas that I'm concerned very deeply about is housing. We have an affordable housing crisis in this country. We're about 7.5 million units short of what would meet the unstimulated demand that it currently exists. And we also have a need to deal with stormwater runoff. Not as big an issue on the east side of the state, but stormwater runoff is the #1 cause of water pollution in America. And thirdly, then, of course, is dealing with the budget challenge. $8.4 billion is a lot of money. That's a big hole to fill. And it may be an opportunity for us to finally deal with our tax system, which is the most regressive in the country. Poor people pay a higher percentage, in fact, a multiple percentage of their income in state and local taxes than upper income people. It's just not right. It's been the case for a long period of time. I'd like to see that as an opportunity we might begin to fix. So those are the three things that are really going to be in front of us in the January session. But above and beyond that, again, I mentioned earlier, an opportunity to maybe move the needle on issues of racial justice, which is 400 years overdue. And then again, the big one, which is climate change.
Okay, and how will you unite the constituents who are divided on those issues?
So when I got elected to Congress, Katie, I told everybody I wanted to be held accountable for two things. First, that I would not demonize people with whom I disagreed. I wouldn't personalize disagreements about policy matters, that I would endeavor to keep my arguments focused on the issue, not on the personalities. And secondly, I invited them to hold me accountable for always looking for common ground. I do believe that there can be common ground found with people that you don't agree with very much, but you got to be willing to look for it. I love to tell this story about going on a trip to Afghanistan, my first year in Congress, as a matter of fact, to visit war theater, and found myself 2 seats away that night at dinner from Joe Wilson, a member of Congress from South Carolina. You probably don't recognize his name, but you'll remember that for which he's famous, which was when he yelled, "You lie," during President Obama's State of the Union speech. So I don't see the world anywhere near the same as Joe Wilson did. But I took the occasion to slide over to him that night and said, "Joe, we don't see the world the same at all. But we're not leaving this table tonight until we find an issue that we can agree on and we agree to work together on it." And by golly, we found it. But it took reaching out. It took an openness that there would be some area. And what is the benefit of that? Well, if I only agree with him 1% of the time, but I find that 1%, I might find 2% or 3 or 5 or 10. And that sets the table for an opportunity to make principled compromises, which is to say, you both get up from the table not getting everything you wanted, but you didn't compromise your principles, but you got enough to get to yes and shake hands. So I still believe in the possibility of doing that, but you have to be willing to commit yourself to it and try.
I agree.
The other element I might add to this, Katie, is we all recognize civic discourse. This goes more to my first point about demonizing opponents. Civic discourse in this country is degraded horribly. The way we talk about one another. Look, I can disagree, and we can fight like cats and dogs over the issue, not over personality, and be willing, therefore, not to reject the humanity of the other human being. And it's so important that we do that, because here's the deal. We live in a pluralistic society. There are lots of different points of view. I certainly have mine. You've heard a bunch of them tonight. But the truth is, if we're going to function as a democracy, we have to be able to figure out how to work together.
Well, you pretty much answered part of the next question, which was, how do you overcome the far left, far right rhetoric that is overwhelming the political discourse in this country? But the next part of the question is, how do you balance these loud signals from the media with the need to develop robust, pragmatic solutions to the problems of today and the problems that are looming on the horizon?
So I think everybody has to find their own path in that regard, Katie. Obviously, I think social media, technology-enabled social media, is a huge influence on civic discourse in this country, and unfortunately not for the positive, because it is though we measure our success in how many Twitter followers we have. And we all know how we get more Twitter followers. We say increasingly outrageous things. We appeal to people's emotions only. Now, look, I possess emotions. My wife accuses me of being the most sentimental man she ever met in her life, but we have to use the other parts of our personhood too, like our brain and rationality. It can't just be fear-mongering. It cannot be fear-mongering.
Yeah, well, I could not agree more. So I think that's about all the time we have for questions tonight. Thank you so much to our viewers for submitting such thoughtful questions. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to reach out again to info@dennyheck.com, and somebody will get back to you. Denny, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us. I know you said before this meeting that you had a very long day, and I know that you're probably tired, and we just really appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate you. And again, I want to say thank you to Okanogan County Democrats. Thank you very, very much. And Katie, best wishes in your race. I look forward to calling you commissioner.
Thank you. I look forward to that call. All right. So if you want to learn more about Denny's campaign, or you'd like to consider contributing, please go to dennyheck.com. However, we also desperately need your help to get more Democrats elected all around Eastern Washington. If you'd like to volunteer or donate, please visit OkanoganDemocrats.org. There's a lot of organizing going on in your community, so please come and help us. Finally, if you'd like to learn more about my campaign, you can visit my website at katiehaven.com. And you can find all of these links in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Stay safe and have a wonderful evening.